Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about Donald Trump's diminishing chances day by day in the 2024 presidential race. We are now just 4 days and 21 hours out from the 2024 race, and it seems that day by day by day, the election is looking better for Kamala Harris and much, much worse for Donald Trump. You can see, for example, now, my forecast is much more bullish on Harris than other forecasts, and we're going to go through it obviously in just a moment. And even in my forecast, you could see a major change from just a few days ago. For example, Georgia has flipped blue in my forecast for the first time in more than a month, since basically 2 months, since the right after the presidential debate when Kamala Harris was at her peak. I mean, Arizona was red for quite a while. That has flipped blue. You can see Nevada has moved from a tilt margin back into a lean margin. Kamala Harris is gaining. She is getting what I don't know exactly what happened, to be completely honest, but she is getting batches of swing state polls that show her way up in the election. For example, you had a batch of CNN polls, their final polls in the election. They had Harris up by 6 in Wisconsin, by 5 in Michigan, 1 in Arizona, 1 in North Carolina, and then a tied race in Pennsylvania and Georgia. I mean, especially those Rust Belt numbers, an absolute surge for Harris. But it's not just my forecast. You can see here in the Economist forecast. And as you all know, I'm sure I don't, I'm the you all know this already, I'm sure. But, forecasts are predicting a 50-50 race. This is what 538 is saying in their forecast. This is what The Economist is saying in their forecast. This is what Nate Silver is saying in his forecast. And the list goes on and on. Why? Because they don't want to be wrong, right? If there's a universal agreement that it is a 50-50 race and someone wins, they could say, well, yeah, we said it was a 50-50 race. Of course somebody was going to win. And what do you notice about The Economist? They literally show a 50-50 race. Kamala Harris wins 50% of the time. Trump wins 50% of the time. Now, looking at electoral vote count, Harris actually wins the election with 270 to Trump's 268. This is their projected electoral vote count. Now, yes, it's a narrow win, but this is the first time Harris has been favored in The Economist for gotta be over a month now. I don't know exactly the date, but weeks and weeks and weeks, The Economist has had Trump up by a narrow margin. Say with 538, we'll see if 538 does flip to Harris eventually. But you can just see Harris's chances in The Economist forecast has risen 3 points, 3% in just the last week. Now, I don't know how much stress and importance we should place on The Economist forecast. Whatever, it's just as valid as 538, just as valid as Nate Silver. I don't talk about them, really much. I just talk about my forecast. But this change is important. This shift is important. +7 in the past week for Harris, down 7 in the past week for Trump. Same issue. And you all know I hate Polymarket. I hate looking at betting odds, but this one is acceptable to use because it just shows the direction that the race is going, even among people, political amateurs, right, who are just watching this election from the outside. You can see that just a couple days ago, Donald Trump was really, I think, at his all-time peak, or only his second all-time peak, right after the presidential debate, the first presidential debate, that is, against Biden. That was Trump's peak. He was near 70% chance of winning. But his second highest peak was just a few days ago, where he was at 65% chance. Today, he has gone down all the way to 64. I mean, yesterday it looks like he was at 63 based off the graph. Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys, Polymarket is an awful election predictor to use if you're basing your map off of Polymarket or any other betting odds. Of course, white crypto guys are going to be much more likely to bet. I mean, those are basically the only people who bet in Polymarket and other betting odds. So obviously not accurate, not accurately reflecting of the actual American electorate. So whatever. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of betting markets. But besides that fact, you can see it in just the raw data itself, not forecasts, not, betting markets. No, you could see it in the data itself. These polling averages. You can see that just a couple days ago, Harris has taken the lead in Michigan in Real Clear Politics. Of course, Real Clear Politics, very associated with Republican-leaning organizations. But even they, in their polling average, they have had to admit that Harris has taken the lead in Michigan. She's now ahead by 0.5 when just 10 days ago or so, Trump was ahead by 1.2%, by over 1%. And just today, she has taken the lead in Wisconsin. Of course, this one has always been narrow, but for quite a while, about 10 days or 11 days, 12 days, Trump has had the lead. Actually, more like 25 days or 15 days, that is. Trump has had the lead in Wisconsin. Today, just today, Harris has taken it back with point 0.2. And that goes back to what I was saying, with these multiple batches of new polls that really shed a bright light on the Harris campaign, on the state of the Harris campaign. It's looking much more positive for her as of now. Then you look at early voting. And this is the most significant point of data because this is actual fact. I mean, this is not polling. This is not a forecast. It's certainly not the betting markets. No, early voting data is actual party registration of the people who have voted early or by mail in this election. And so far, it is looking great for Democrats. You can see Democrats retain a strong lead in Pennsylvania, a 26-point lead percent there. They retain a strong lead in Wisconsin, an 11% margin there. Michigan is a 5% margin, and North Carolina and Georgia, traditionally very bad states for Democrats in early voting. And what Democrats are have been able to do in these past few weeks, or past couple weeks, I should say, is really close this margin. I mean, I made a video about early voting. Just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, and I remember Republicans had some like an 8-point lead in Georgia and a 5-point lead in North Carolina. That has been reduced to a 3-point lead and a 1-point lead, respectively, in both those states, Georgia and North Carolina. So, when you look at the polling about early voting, early voters specifically, how they are breaking to Harris, what it indicates, I mean, it is so lopsided in favor of Harris that what it indicates is that independent voters, these registered independents, are breaking heavily for Harris. That with the fact that some Republicans are switching over to Harris. This is going to be a major point of the campaign, a major point. If we look back after Harris wins on this campaign and say what could have pointed towards, if it is a large victory for Harris, like I am predicting, like this map, a complete replication of Biden's 2020 victory map, as you can see here, this will be one of the points. The fact that every single poll of early voters before the election indicate that Harris had huge leads, and thus that independents were breaking heavily for Harris and that some Republicans were switching over to Harris. All in all, day by day, with shrinking leads in North Carolina, shrinking leads in Georgia, shrinking leads in Nevada, shrinking leads in Arizona, and very stagnant races across the blue wall states, simply put, Donald Trump's chances of winning the election have diminished. And when it comes to polling, as you all know, my forecast, very little value placed in polling because I've said it so many times now. It doesn't matter if Harris is ahead by half a point in a state on average. It doesn't matter if Trump is ahead by half a point in a state on average. It doesn't matter if Harris is ahead by a whole point or even a point and a half, or if Trump is ahead by a point or a point and a half in a state. It doesn't matter because polling can't be that accurate. It really doesn't matter when it's within a point and a half. It means that the polling doesn't really indicate everything. Looking at historical trends, it could go either way, in opposite direction. Just think of it as a 50-50 race in polling, and when you make a prediction, consider the other factors. But when you look at polling specifically, and I'm not about to say, yes, Harris was ahead by 0.2 10 days ago, now she's ahead by 1 point, right? That's good for her, but again, it really doesn't matter. But when it comes to polling, the fact that she's ahead at all in Michigan, the fact that she's ahead at all in Wisconsin, she's ahead by 0.6%. The fact that she is Nevada, what is she down? She's down by 0.3. Again, doesn't matter when it comes to, the closeness of this race. Even being down 0.7 in Pennsylvania, it really doesn't matter. But what does matter is that polling indicates basically across the 7 battlegrounds, it's a 50-50 toss-up race. And what, pollsters, what's important to remember about these polls is that pollsters do not want a repeat of 2016 and 2020. They do not want to understate Trump's support once again. I don't see how, a lot of conservative biased predictors will say, Trump is winning, the popular vote by like 3 points, and he's winning New Hampshire and Maine and New Mexico and Virginia, just because the polls understated him in 2016 and 2020. Sure, that'd be true if the polls were understating him again. But the polling industry is in the dumps right now. Nobody wants to give, no companies, no media industries want to give money to pollsters who keep getting it wrong. So, why, it's just logic here. They are not going to continue. And, pollsters have released this that they're trying to change their strategies to, not repeat the mistakes of 2016 and 2020. They do not want to get it dead wrong again, as they did in both of those years. They do not want to understate Trump's support. Ultimately, I think that it'll be too much. I think that his support will be understated. I think that it'll be a bit of a reverse from 2016, where now you actually have shy Harris voters. That means these people who, these voters who had traditionally voted Republican all their lives, right? Conservative leaning individuals are now saying, with the overturning of Roe, with January 6th, with Donald Trump being a convicted felon, right? Everything that has happened since Trump left office, they cannot really stomach voting for Trump again, even if they're conservative leaning. They don't want to say that in polls. They don't want to admit that to their friends and family. They don't want it to be at all recorded in polls, whether, that's people find out or not, whether it's completely secret or not. They don't want to admit it in polls. If there is any sort of shy voter for Trump or Harris, it would absolutely be in the positive for Harris. It would absolutely understate Harris. I don't see Harris down in Pennsylvania right now. I don't even think it's a possibility. In my forecast, you can see here, Pennsylvania, I actually have it as a lean Democrat margin, and I'm pretty confident in it. Of course, we could go state by state, and I do in my actual video specifically about the forecast. But this goes for many states. You've got trending left suburbs, relatively stagnant rural areas, but again, it doesn't really matter if urban areas turn out. Suburbs continue to trend towards the Democratic Party, which they will, and as long as we don't see anything crazy in rural regions, then Harris wins, for example, here, the state of Pennsylvania, but the same goes for Georgia. Arizona's a bit iffy. You could argue either way because the suburbs aren't that, quickly trending left. But the same goes for Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina. That one's big. Wisconsin, and big one also, Wisconsin. So Donald Trump's chances of winning the election, I believe are in a very weak place right now. When you look at the electoral map, yes, there's three tilt blue states: Wisconsin, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Look at the margins I have them. Arizona could go either way, so close, 0.2%. Georgia, only 0.3%. Wisconsin, only 0.4%. This is outdated. I have to change Nevada, by the way. That's over 1% now for Harris. So when you look at those three states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, they're razor thin. Wisconsin, only a 0.4% margin. They could go either way. But for Donald Trump to win the election, he would have to win all three. I would have to be there would have to be enough of an error in my forecast for Donald Trump to win all three of these states, plus, and this is important, plus hold North Carolina. I think that North Carolina will go to him by, I also have to change this. It's more of a half a point victory for him there right now, 0.5%. But he would have to hold North Carolina, win Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, all of which I have going to Harris. It's a narrow path to victory. Yes, it's doable, but it's much narrower than Harris's path to victory, where she has almost locked down at this point Michigan and Pennsylvania. I'm very confident in those calls. Nevada, very likely to go to her. And then on top of that, she just needs one more. It could be North Carolina. It could be Georgia. It could be Wisconsin. It could be Arizona. All four are tilt margins for Trump right now. All she has to do is pick off one, let's say it's Wisconsin, and she wins the election. Donald Trump, he would have to win all four. It's not like, again, this is the map. Going back to the map, this is the map right now. This is the current forecast. It's not like Harris in that case, where he only has to pick off one. No, it's not like he could just pick off Arizona. He's only at 246. He still has a while to go. He's got to get Georgia. He's got to hold North Carolina. Then he'd have to flip Wisconsin. It's a very narrow path to victory for Donald Trump. Very low chances right now. If I'd have to place a number on it, I would say Harris is probably 60-40 favored to win the election much higher than anything else you'll see, in the forecast, like 50-50 in The Economist, or 63 to 36 in favor of Trump in Poly Market. I guarantee you that's not happening. Or even 538 saw Trump favored 53 to 47. I'm thinking, looking at my forecast, looking at this map, the margins, or I'm sorry, the chances are more like 60-40 in favor of Harris. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe down below. That helps out a lot. If you enjoyed, that is, drop a comment. Let me hear your thoughts on this topic. Drop a like as well, and I will see you all later.